It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be here today to talk to you about some issues going on within our community and talk to you about the police department. I want to start out with talking a little bit about domestic violence, behavioral health, some of the things that we're doing here in the department. It's been a road to get there. Nothing happens quick, especially in government, but we're making some significant strides in our police department and our community on trying to address some of these issues. And the task force that we're putting together is really going to assist us in that endeavor. When you've heard the mayor talk and you've heard the manager talk, and we constantly talk about our small numbers, whether it's small numbers in crime, small numbers in the number of employees that we have, especially when it comes to public safety, one thing you'll hear me say constantly is it's not just the police department, it's the community as a whole that makes that happen. It's the partnership that we have with the community that really allows us to keep our staffing numbers down, that impacts crime in our community. We're not crime free, we never will be, but we do our very best to work together, to work in partnership, and of course the trust in our police department is a big part of that. And that's the one thing that I will always tell you: when I lose your trust and I lose your confidence, then I've lost my ability to do my job. And we're very fortunate here in this community that we do maintain a high level of trust and a high level of confidence in our police department and our relationship that we share with the community. These issues we're going to talk about today, faith-based community plays a very important part in dealing with these issues. And another important partner with us is our school systems. Because in all of these issues, there's, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's substance use, whether it's substance abuse, or whether it's mental health, there's a wheel, there's a continuum. And if you take any piece of that, any spoke out of that wheel, the wheel flattens and it falls apart. And that is that there's an enforcement component that has to go along with it. There's a treatment and rehabilitation component. There's an education component. And all of those things have to work in partnership. In some of the cases, the enforcement component, where we get involved a lot of times, isn't necessarily the most critical part, but it still has to be in there because a lot of the need to identify services that have to be provided come from that call for service that we face out there in the community. And what I don't have numbers for you. I'm going to throw some charts and numbers up here today when we talk about substance use and substance abuse in our community with our kids. I don't have numbers to tell you what the percentage is of calls for service that we deal with that deal with these very issues of behavioral health, substance use, substance abuse, mental health, but I can tell you it is significant. Domestic violence, mental health, substance abuse run hand in hand. So some of the things that we're doing, about a little over a year ago, we started doing domestic violence lethality assessments on every domestic violence call for service that we go on. There's a series of questions that our police officers, when they go out on the call for service, they talk to the victim, and they ask the victim a series of questions that have been put together by a lot of smart people who are a lot smarter than me, that will tell us, based on how these questions are answered, is there a higher probability of reoffending or escalation of offending by the suspect in the domestic violence case. They ask those questions. What we previously did was those would go to our investigations lieutenant. Our investigations lieutenant would then take those, would rank them, would identify if there's a high risk. Then we put together a safety plan in conjunction with our counseling unit that we have within the police department. With that safety plan, then we would do follow-up to see what we could do to prevent or reduce the opportunity for reoffending. We've taken that a step further. A year ago, our council authorized 2 positions for 2 police officers. And my commitment was that I would take those 2 positions and involve them in domestic violence. It takes, you've heard me say before, a year to 18 months to hire, train, and get people into those positions. By July of this year, we had the officers in place. This year, we were given a sergeant to supervise those officers in addition to some other functions, and we formed a family violence unit within our crime suppression team. Their goal is to be highly trained to deal with mental health issues and to be highly trained to deal with domestic violence issues. They're now getting, within 24 hours, they get the reports that were taken the day before. In many cases, they're actually responding to the domestic violence calls for service. They are involved with reviewing the lethality assessments. They formed a partnership with our prosecutor's office, with our victim advocate, with our probation officer in town, county attorney's office, and with our counseling unit to then identify multiple resources that can be used to assist the victim and to identify opportunities for reoffending. Since we put this into place in July, and it's only 2 officers, I can tell you we have seen significant results. We've been able to take the time to look at these cases, look at prior behavior, and identify cases that could be escalated to felony offenses, which means we're getting that offender out of the family environment, creating that separation where before it would have been filed as a misdemeanor. On the mental health side, what they're doing is when we identify people in the community that we're having frequent contacts with or demonstrating mental health issues on calls for service, we team them up with our counselors. They'll take a counselor out there, check on that person, and with that person we'll try to identify services that that person may need. I'm very familiar with one case where I believe we saved a life, where we had a member of our community that has suffered tremendous loss in her family. That she lost one son to suicide, she lost one son to a drug overdose, recently lost her husband, basically was on her own. She had contacted me on the phone, was very concerned based on that phone conversation, sent our family violence officer out with a counselor, and found that basically since her husband had died, she had curled up in a ball in her house, hadn't eaten, hadn't showered, was not taking care of herself, and we were able to intervene with that, get her the help that she needed, get a family member out here, and I honestly believe it saved her life. So that's the kind of impact we're having with just 2 officers, and teaming them up and that multidisciplinary approach to providing services, enforcement, and utilizing the services that we have within our department with counseling and within the town. So lots of success, and hopefully we'll continue on that journey and may even expand it in the future. I'm going to throw a lot of numbers and a lot of charts at you this morning. We're going to work to make this presentation available to you. You've heard me talk in the past about some of the issues that we're facing, but it's been from my perspective. I reached out to the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission. I had the honor to serve on the commission up until this year for a period of time. Shauna Malone is a rock star at the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission. Reached out to her and said, hey, can you give me some numbers for Gilbert? I'm talking about our youth. I will point you in the direction of the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission Arizona Youth Survey that's online. If you get a chance, go in there and read it. What I will tell you is this is all based on self-reporting of our kids in our schools across the state of Arizona. And all of this data comes from our kids in Gilbert, Arizona about what's going on in our community when it comes to substance use. With that, with all self-reporting, keep in mind these numbers are probably low. I'm going to scare the heck out of some of you, I warn you, especially if you've got kids. We talked about consumption. Here's some numbers for you. This is the percentage of youth that said 30 days prior to this survey what substances they had used. You see alcohol is at the high end. One thing you're going to see about marijuana, as we talk about the issues with marijuana, is that once we started seeing the medical marijuana issue come to light, we started seeing perceptions by our kids and use by our kids starting to increase. Because we've said it's bad for you, and we've been able to hopefully be successful in saying it's bad for you, but now we're saying, well, it's maybe in some cases it's not bad for you, and we're sending a mixed message to our kids. The other thing that I point out to you is the prescription drug issue, and that's something we're going to talk about in a little more detail. This is, I believe, a good news story. A lot of areas are trending downward. This is how kids are using prescription drugs in our community and what they're doing, mixing alcohol and prescription drugs. Some of you have heard me talk about the Skittle parties, where they go into their parents' medicine cabinets, rate them of all the medications, bring them to the party, they dump them in a bowl, shake it up, and they pass it around. They have no idea what they're taking. And that's a fact of what's going on, not just in Gilbert, but all over. And then mixing pain relievers and sedatives. Where are the kids getting their alcohol? You take a look at a party, you see that there's a downward trend, but start taking a look at some of the other trends of where they're getting it. Parent or guardian, adult family member, liquor license facility. That's something we can have an impact on the enforcement side of it. Where do they get their marijuana? Take a look at 2012-14, we see some downward trends. That's some of this medical marijuana card. Somebody who has a medical marijuana card, they get it and they're then giving it to kids. Family or relative, home. Again, it's more readily available now. The kids can get it just like we're seeing with the prescription drug issue. Where do they get their prescription drugs? And this is something that we can have a definite impact on. And what I'm going to tell you about the prescription drug issue is later you're going to see a report on using heroin, and you see the numbers of heroin down, and you keep hearing me saying heroin use is up. All the studies are telling us that prescription drugs are the pathway to heroin abuse. So what you're seeing is prescription drug use by our kids going up, while heroin may be declining. That's because they get them hooked on the prescription drugs first. Then we start getting that 18 to 25 age group, where now they're not in school, and now they're reverting to heroin, and that's the numbers that we're seeing across the country that are skyrocketing. So one of the keys to trying to reduce the heroin use is to get a handle on this prescription drug issue. This is scary. Usually a downward trend is a good thing. When are they using their drugs for the first time? What's the age? And the alcohol? Look at the alcohol. One out of 3 Gilbert youth started drinking alcohol in elementary school. 84.6% of Gilbert youth who drank started before they could drive a car legally. These are the things that you all can help us on, that our schools can help us on. Again, that enforcement piece is just a small part of that solution. Education, prevention, rehabilitation are extremely important in these areas. One out of 5 Gilbert youth who use prescription drugs started using in elementary school. We're talking about the illegal use of prescription drugs, not what a doctor has given them. 83.2% of Gilbert youth started using prescription drugs illegally before they could drive a car. These are the perceptions. We perceive that it's not a big deal by our kids. You can take a look at the marijuana, prescription drugs. Again, the website is up here for the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission. So what can we do? There are several initiatives. Again, the task force is going to help us, I think, significantly. Another thing that we're working on in the police department is with our community partnerships we're trying to